Hello everybody, welcome back to the Wrestling Guardians podcast. This is episode 3 in our new podcast series. Hope everybody is doing well out there. How are you doing in here? How's your week been?
Hey Dan, been a bit of a busy week, but hope you and your family and loved ones are all keeping well. Same goes out to our listeners. And we've had some interesting events in the world of wrestling this week. Quite eager to go over them with you.
Yep, should be an interesting one. Definitely been a few unforeseen and unexpected events in the world of wrestling this week, actually. I think probably a good place to start, and I think the thing that most people are talking about at the moment is the new concept Raw Underground, which was introduced this week. So I suppose if anyone's ever wondered what it would be like for a WWE and Fight Club crossover, I think they've got their answer, I guess. What are your thoughts on Raw Underground so far?
Dan, from the initial looks of it, I mean, it was a success on the day. And some of this you could also potentially put down to Shane McMahon being back on television. But this clearly shows to you that Vince McMahon is desperate and he's willing to sort of do anything to grab attention and get a short-term fix as far as the ratings are concerned. He's in full hotshot mode.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, he has managed to kind of grab people's attention, at least in the short term. It'll be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out. But yeah, I think, really interesting the fact that Shane's involved in all this. I mean, we know his sort of general interest in the world of MMA. I think back in the day, I believe Shane was trying to convince his dad to buy the UFC. So he's obviously clearly got a personal interest in this. And it'd be interesting to see kind of how this goes, really. Some new stars that could come out of this, and then also kind of utilising sort of current sort of main roster talent as well. I don't know, long term, I don't know whether this is really going to bring kind of people back in their droves, but at least it's something relatively fresh to talk about when it comes to WWE.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, it looks like a lot of underground fight scenes that you'd see in B-grade movies at the moment than anything closely resembling Fight Club, but there is certainly time for them to get it right.
What do you think this sort of says about wrestling at the moment, though? Because obviously this sort of presentation and format is very is a big departure from what we sort of normally see with professional wrestling. Is it, like, to me, it's kind of another indication that we're kind of moving away from the fanfare and sort of the kayfabe world of wrestling and more to kind of like a shoot fight feel, something that sort of closely mimics the UFC. I mean, do you kind of agree with that? Do you think wrestling as it used to be is kind of like a lost art form now?
Dan, I think it's harder for wrestling to be the art form we know and love when you don't have fans, because so much of it really is about that interactive theatre element. But as you said, it's certainly becoming a little bit more of something resembling a bunch of movie fight scenes packaged together in a 3-hour television show. I mean, there certainly is a place for these cinematic matches, as with the right creative and the right characters, it really does make a mark. But there have also been a lot of failures from WWE and AEW.
No, absolutely, yeah. But I think it's more just the fact that, it's obviously, from what I've seen anyway, it's sort of been presented as as if it was kind of real life, and this has always been something that's kind of infiltrated wrestling throughout the years, that old concept of wrestling being kind of cartoonish and sort of scripted with kind of big, larger than life characters. I mean, it all seems to be going towards kind of just sort of straightforward, this guy versus this guy, kind of getting the better of him in a kind of straight up sort of fight as opposed to a wrestling match. And I guess, I don't know, as like an older fan, quote unquote, or, more of a purist, I kind of look at something like Raw Underground and think, this isn't really what wrestling meant to me growing up. And I guess that kind of makes it harder for me to really sort of get into the product, if that makes sense.
But Vince McMahon is in desperation mode, and I don't know how long Raw Underground lasts. It seems to me like it could very well be one of those things that tanks in the ratings one week and they immediately pretend like it never happened.
it could well be. And I think for a certain kind of age category of fans, it's horrible memories of the Brawl for All maybe coming up. That's something we could maybe see a replica of.
Well, I mean, hopefully they won't feed Drew McIntyre to Butterbean anytime soon.
Yeah, hopefully they've kind of learned from those mistakes. But yeah, it's obviously a very new concept, and there's already kind of talk about people that we'd maybe like to see kind of being introduced into the Raw Underground concept. Is there anyone maybe from the current roster that you would like to see or think would kind of benefit from this type of format?
It's hard to say, Dan, but I think this sort of presentation certainly benefits somebody like Aleister Black, because I think he really feels a little out of place on the main roster, for me at least at the moment. I'm not really impressed by the kind of work that he's doing, and I think in this sort of setting, like, his character could vibe with it, if that makes any sense. Um, so that's somebody I'd like to see, and he certainly has a lot more of that shoot box type of in-ring style as well. So I think Aleister Black could benefit from this type of presentation.
Yeah, I guess it's maybe kind of the inevitable conclusion of that kind of move that I've been talking about towards more kind of straight up like shoot fighting style. Gone are the days when wrestling superstars were basically people who had kind of other jobs like the Repo Man or Diesel. Like they really like to push the fact that their superstars have kind of MMA backgrounds and things like that, so it kind of makes sense to put them into this type of sort of situation. I think another name that I think a few people are talking about would be Matt Riddle. I think he would sort of fit into this because, again, of his MMA background. Depending on how big it gets, maybe Brock Lesnar making a kind of special appearance against somebody. So yeah, it certainly seems like the seeds have been sown for this over the sort of the last few years with WWE, just because of the way they're going and the type of superstar that they're wanting to to highlight.
Yeah, I agree with you. No, definitely. But let's see. I mean, I'm not sure how much staying power it's gonna have. Um, because if you looked at the ratings, I mean, the WWE's core audience, which is usually middle-aged men, I mean, they didn't. I mean, they sort of got bored of it after a little while, and they sort of left. The demographic that it really hit home with was women in their 20s. So let's see what sort of programming they're going to put forward on Raw.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess this isn't. I'm just sort of thinking back to sort of previous times in wrestling, and I suppose this isn't necessarily a brand new concept. I mean, I don't know if you're old enough to remember when Ken Shamrock first came to the WWF. And that was a kind of a huge sort of crossover type situation there, because you had somebody from the UFC world, and then he was involved in things like Lions Den matches, and I think he had a match with Owen Hart in the Hart Dungeon. So WWE, they've always had this kind of a side to them, I guess, but to put it into sort of such a sort of a big stage, the last hour of Raw, I think it could definitely have some legs here, but definitely I guess it's kind of too early to say for sure at this point though.
I think we definitely need to see whether it's here to stay, but at least they're trying.
I think this could potentially tempt somebody like Ken Shamrock back. I think I'd quite like to see him back in the WWE fold.
Dan, I mean, at 56 years of age, I mean, it really is hard to see Ken Shamrock being able to contribute, certainly as an in-ring performer. Were you thinking of him more as a manager or something like that?
No, I think this is the sort of the 14-year-old me kind of just wanting to relive some of the days that I remember when Ken Shamrock was kind of running wild on the WWE stage. I thought it was just a great addition to the WWF back in the 90s, and yeah, I just want to see that play out again.
I believe he worked Sami Callihan recently at Impact Wrestling. I'm not sure how that turned out, but
Yeah, no, I didn't watch it, but yeah, it's just knowing that he's in some way kind of still in the sort of the fight world. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, if there is any sort of space for him to come back as a kind of a mentor or a kind of a manager role, depending on how obviously Raw Underground kind of plays out, that would be kind of cool. It would be a bit of a throwback to those days of when the UFC were first kind of getting the attention of popular culture, and Vince was definitely aware of that. I mean, it's maybe one of those kind of what if moments, but what do you think it would have been like if Vince would have bought out the UFC? Difficult question, I know, but
Yeah, it's a good question, and I certainly don't know if he would have turned that ship around, because the UFC's, because the Fertitas and everything they managed to achieve with the UFC, that's like one of the great stories in modern American business, because this was essentially a failing enterprise that was frowned upon by everybody in legislature, and they made it a multi-billion-dollar company, and I doubt Vince would have done that. The way the Fertitas ran, got sport regulated throughout the country and everything like that. I have a hard time seeing Vince believing in the UFC to such an extent. Maybe he would have used the library, maybe he would have used some of the characters on his programming, but that's really the extent to which I think he would have gone. I have a hard time, seeing him, care about the UFC to that much of an extent.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think the initial kind of interest in it all was how controversial it was. There were sort of major kind of news outlets talking about how sort of horrendous it was, and there was talk of it being made illegal, and I guess that's the kind of controversy that Vince was trying to court back then, wasn't it? It was to kind of gain a ground over his competitors, but yeah, the likelihood of him really turning it into something that we know the UFC to be today, probably not very likely.
So, Dan, did you manage to watch any AEW?
Yeah, we know how fond we are of AEW on this channel. I did watch it this week, and to be honest, I'm being fair, it was a bit of an improvement. I managed to sit through most of it. I think, although obviously it started with this 12-man tag team match, which I didn't watch a second of. I just really couldn't be bothered with it. But yeah, you just think surely they're trying to troll us when they do this. Like, how many people can you put in one match? And how many, I didn't watch the match, but I imagine most people got in a tope suicida, and the rest of them had to kind of just stand there and sort of pretend to fall over when they caught them out. I don't know. I despair sometimes.
I think Kenny Omega probably came away from that match thinking he painted his own version of a Rembrandt, but yeah, I don't think it was it was nothing noteworthy. It was a bit of a clustermuck in my opinion.
What do you make of the Dark Order as a faction in AEW?
I think the Dark Order is still sort of straddling this line between comedy and being like the sort of brooding, kick-ass sort of faction, and maybe I think they sort of need to establish a little bit more of a firm identity. Although I must admit, I think Brody Lee's impersonations of Vince McMahon are hilarious, and they do make me chuckle. Now, I'm not someone. I'm not a masochist. I'm going to say it outright. So I don't watch too much of Being the Elite, because I don't need any more. I don't need to watch any more AEW programming than I already do. But I think on his appearances on that program, he's been pretty solid. So I'm definitely a fan of Brody Lee's.
Yeah, I definitely agree. They need some kind of like a more like firmer identity about them. I think at the minute they're just being used as the sort of the go-to heels to kind of showcase some of the baby faces against, and I don't really like I suppose the idea of the Dark Order is to kind of strip you of your kind of identity and you become a kind of cult following, but they're kind of doing that too well, because I couldn't tell you other than Brody Lee and a few others who actually is a member of the faction, and I don't really care either. So maybe they're kind of doing that whole cult thing too well, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think you're right. They've stripped away these guys of their personality, and pro wrestling is literally about personality.
Yeah. One thing I did sort of kind of enjoy about AEW was the Santana and Ortiz versus Best Friends match, because I guess initially it was just a pleasure to be able to see, you know, a straight up tag team match involving, you know, 4 men. That doesn't seem to happen anymore in AEW, but and I thought it was a pretty good match. I quite like Santana as a talent. I think he's a much sort of better talent than Ortiz. I think he just gets the business a bit more. And I believe he was the one who was involved in that kind of mini feud with Moxley when he cut like a really impressive promo on Moxley after he sort of blinded him in one eye. And I think he's a potential star for them actually going forward. I don't know if you agree with that.
I definitely agree with you, Dan. I think both guys are charismatic, to be fair, but like you said, Santana clearly is the one with a higher ceiling. But at this point in time, they're sort of too deeply embedded in our conscience as the tag team. So it's going to take a little bit of work if at some point this guy is going to start working towards becoming a single star. But he's certainly talented enough to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this match really showed that. One thing I would say is that I think when I look at Trent, one thing I think when I look at him is that he needs to get as far away as possible from that indie piece of crap that he's in a team with, Chucky something. I like. Have you seen this guy?
Well, I mean, they are the best friends. So.
He's, like the guy. He doesn't look like a professional wrestler. He doesn't sound like one. I'm pretty sure I could take him in a match. Just whereas I think Trent is actually like a genuine sort of talent. I know like he had a bit of a run in WWE that didn't really go anywhere, but I think there's something about him. The other guy, it just epitomizes that notion that, you know, AEW is basically independent wrestling on a bigger stage.
I mean, I don't really find Chuck Taylor to be particularly impressive. Like you said, I mean, I don't find him to be that offensive either, but he is as milquetoast as they come, let's say.
I don't know, maybe I was just in a bad mood when I sat down to watch it, but I just thought, who the hell is this guy? There's just nothing about him that's particularly impressive or engaging or anything, and so, you know, it just sort of, it's a great example of how AEW kind of straddles that line between having lots of people that genuinely have, you know, potential, and you could see, you know, maybe in the future if these guys were utilised properly, there could be a lot of good stuff to come out of this, whereas there's this kind of underbelly of bland independent talent that they don't seem to want to let go of as well.
Yeah, and there's also the cadre of ex-WWE wrestlers that they seem determined to sign.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, were you particularly impressed by the in-ring debut of the former Zack Ryder?
No, I mean, I don't think it's a good idea for him to work exactly the same in-ring style that he worked in WWE. And his in-ring style definitely doesn't work without a live audience. And it's also not a good idea to use the exact same finisher that you were using in the WWE. But yeah, and I mean, at this point, like, everybody sort of associates Matt Cardona as the lower card guy in WWE. And he needs a change in look, he needs a change in presentation, and he needs a compelling character for his run in AEW to go anywhere. If not, he will just fail. I know there was a time when he was this cult star on YouTube and everything, but that was 9 years ago now, and nobody remembers Long Island IC.
Yeah, I would have struggled to remember the name of his channel actually, because I think the thing of it is, you know, this crossover from WWE to AEW, like, it's only really going to be effective if it's somebody who, you know, the fans see as somebody who, you know, was vastly underutilized by WWE. So, you know, Dean Ambrose to John Moxley kind of works because people know the potential that Moxley has and give him a platform where he can be more about himself. Zack Ryder, I mean, I know he was kind of held down, I suppose, but he had a long enough tenure in the company to prove himself one way or the other. So I don't really I didn't really expect anything from him when he first came, and then to see him in the ring for the first time, basically doing the exact same movesets and sort of presented himself as Zack Ryder 2.0, it's just it's not gonna convince many people of his kind of future prospects.
I agree with you. What did you think of Matt Hardy's promo?
I thought it was pretty good. I like the fact that this feud with Sammy Guevara is kind of taken on a little bit more of a serious note rather than just being all about comedy. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, we know Matt can hold a pretty decent promo. He's not been known for his kind of work on the mic that much, but I thought it was pretty decent.
So I'm not impressed by Matt Hardy transforming into 69 different personalities on AEW television. I think he's somebody he's somebody who definitely needs a filter, and when you give him too much creative control, he is running amok. But as you said, the sort of idea of him mentoring the younger guys is definitely a step in the right direction, and I feel he's and Matt Hardy to me has felt a little bit lost ever since he stopped working with Chris Jericho. So.
Yeah. I guess from a point of view of somebody like Sammy Guevara, then Matt Hardy would be definitely somebody to benefit from in a kind of long-term feud. I mean, he's been around a long time. He knows the business. He could maybe sort of mentor somebody like Guevara in just how to kind of get across and be a professional wrestler, which would be difficult to do if you were just left to the mercy of the elite in an AEW. At least Matt has kind of been there and done that, so to speak. So yeah, I'm expecting good things out of this feud, and hopefully it will kind of launch Guevara into maybe kind of a higher platform than he is at the moment.
Sorry, Dan, before we move on, can I just ask you, do you think that angle with Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara, do you think that was a busted blade job, or do you think Sammy Guevara just felt like drenching the ring in Matt Hardy's blood?
I don't know. I mean, I've seen some reports that people weren't too happy with that segment. I haven't really read too much into it, but there was something about it that definitely felt more kind of shoot than I think it was meant to. Either that's like very good kind of like work on AEW's part, or maybe there was just something legitimate there that wasn't meant to happen fully.
Yeah. I mean, there was also color in the main event, wasn't there? If I'm not mistaken, so I'm sure something went awry with one of these two segments.
Yeah. But I thought it was a pretty. I don't know exactly what you'd call that move, but the when Guevara leaps onto Matt Hardy on the table, I thought that was pretty cool.
Right. No, I mean, Sammy Guevara is a great gymnast, as we've discussed before. The question is whether he can learn how to wrestle.
Exactly, yeah. I think that's what I'm saying. I think how to turn an AEW gymnast into a professional wrestler. You need somebody outside of the AEW fold, like Matt Hardy. So, yeah.
I can just imagine guys like Dean Malenko and Arn Anderson just stewing, sitting in the backstage area, watching these guys do their thing.
Yes. I really would like to be a fly on the wall when Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard are talking backstage about AEW.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine Arn Anderson agenting a match in which Kenny Omega is wrestling like, whatever utensil, like a frying pan or something?
I know I completely understand your frustrations with Omega because of some of the things he's done in the past, but it's just funny how because of his run in New Japan, like a few people kind of see what he is actually capable of, and it's really frustrating that he doesn't give us that side of his work more often.
Dan, I don't think you get Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega is an artiste.
Well, yeah, just give him to someone who knows what they're doing and let them control things, and he can be, somewhat entertaining. But yes, I'm not going to defend the guy too much because I know the atrocities that he's brought on the wrestling business over the years.
Yeah. Dan, would we say Kenny Omega is a gymnast or a professional wrestler?
Well, like you say, I mean, he's neither. He's a tortured artist, isn't he? I mean, he
Yeah, that's fair.
he paints canvases with his footwork. You know, it's
You just know that Kenny Omega thinks like there should be there should be one of his matches playing at like a wing in Tate Modern, like constantly on a massive projector, like a Kenny Omega match playing in perpetuity right next to like a Picasso painting at the Tate Modern.
oh dear. So another sort of big thing on this episode was the debate, Orange Cassidy and Chris Jericho. Yeah, again, not something that's going to please the traditionalists of professional wrestling, but something that was relatively entertaining, I suppose, for what it was worth.
And Eric Bischoff, of course, making a special guest appearance. I mean, I think Chris Jericho is the MVP of AEW. Like, he makes anybody he works with more relevant in the company, and in some ways, he is the glue of this show. He was the perfect, like, sort of uncool heel to whatever Orange Cassidy is trying to be. For a character such as Orange Cassidy, I think this is as close to the perfect, home run promo as you can get, because that character obviously can't, cut like a John Cena style, overly passionate kind of monologue. So
yeah, but I think that was the problem though I had with this segment, because obviously the inference was that Orange Cassidy doesn't speak, but I think they were trying to tell the story of like, oh, if pushed to a certain extent, he has the ability to say something meaningful and impactful. But when he tried to cut that promo, it just fell, for me anyway, it just felt very flat and very kind of amateur. So kind of if that was the story they were trying to tell, I don't think it came across that well. I mean, it's another example of Chris Jericho obviously being the great talent that he is, and kind of being a bit too good, and just sort of showing the other guy up as someone who is basically just a glorified indie wrestler.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I personally find Orange Cassidy more entertaining than some of our beloved gymnasts on AEW, but I think that's fair. You can't compete with Chris Jericho.
Like, one thing, like I think you're sort of more positive about Orange Cassidy than I am, but one thing I definitely will say for him is that at least his character is kind of honest about the fact that they want to kind of portray wrestling as this kind of sort of silly, kind of funny thing to kind of have fun with. The Young Bucks kind of do it, but still think they're doing it seriously, whereas at least Orange Cassidy has the confidence just to come up and say, you know what, this is kind of a mockery of things, but it's getting over, so I don't really care. So that's why I have slightly more respect for Orange Cassidy than I do for the rest of the Elite.
Yeah, he's strangely self-aware, which isn't something you can say about a lot of professional wrestlers.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Do you think what do you think the conclusion of the match is going to be? I mean, because it kind of it seemed to me anyway that they were trying to tell the story that Cassidy's probably going to get the win here. Do you think that is needed? Do you think that's going to be a good way to go?
It's certainly set up for Cassidy to sort of fluke a win or steal it in some sort of underdog fashion, and for it to be this huge deal. I mean, it's not like Chris Jericho can't take a loss. Chris Jericho can certainly afford to take a loss, and he'll get his heat back on the microphone on the next episode of Dynamite. So I don't really think it's a big deal. He can absolutely go over Chris Jericho. I don't think it's an issue at all.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Just looking at the inner circle, I mean, I know we've spoken about Santana already. I mean, do you is there anyone else in that faction that you kind of would like to see have a singles push at some point?
I certainly think Santana is the guy, Dan, because I'm not the biggest Jack Hager fan in the world. I think Jack Hager does have personality if you watch him in some interviews that he does when promoting his MMA fights and stuff. But I'm not sure that sort of translates into this Brock Lesnar style menace or anything like that. I think Santana certainly is the guy I'd like to see get a singles push in that faction.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Hager he's kind of doing probably the best work that he probably can at the moment, just being that kind of that kind of background, like muscle guy. I think if you gave him any more of the spotlight, it'd probably, sort of shed a light on how kind of he's got limitations as a professional wrestler, kind of all round. So yeah, I think Santana definitely has something about him that I really want to see sort of develop. Guevara, I mean,
Hold on, the Summer Olympics have been postponed to February. Maybe Guevara's thinking of bringing a gold medal to the United States.
yes, and good luck to him. But yeah, at this stage, obviously, he's just a glorified gymnast. But yeah, given the right mentoring, he is under at least the on-screen guidance of Chris Jericho. But if there is something that Jericho has, can teach him in a real sense, then yeah, there's definitely something that could be done there. And in working with guys like Matt Hardy is only going to help him. Still a young guy, so still has the opportunity to break out and become an actual professional wrestler.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, he's been... I believe it was Jim Ross who compared him to Eddie Guerrero, and I think Jim Ross's work has slacked off in AEW. And I think that's an almost blasphemous comparison, because Eddie Guerrero is like one of the great performers we've ever seen. And here we have Sammy Guevara, who's preparing to win a gold medal in the gymnastics.
I don't know, I see him more as like a synchronized swimmer or a diver, personally, than a gymnast. But he could do that barrel roll thing he did on Matt Hardy off a diving board. I think that would probably get him a silver at least. Oh dear. We're really cementing our reputation as the grumpy old men of YouTube.
We're finding our niche.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Only took 3 episodes. Oh dear. I think we'd be remiss to not talk about the MJF segment, which is quickly becoming my favourite part of AEW now. I just absolutely loved when they at the end of that promo they put to him, what if Darby Allin wins, and he said something to the effect of like, oh, facing a 125-pound emo kid, that's really going to be a challenge. I just thought that was so good.
Yeah, MJF is quickly becoming my favorite wrestler in the industry right now, and I really think he should go over Dean Ambrose. I mean, I beg your pardon, John Moxley at All Out. I mean, I know Moxley's fairly popular with the AEW fans and everything, but he isn't doing much with the title. Let him drop it to MJF. Maybe it's like one of those finishes where there's a little bit of Deus Ex Machina and somebody runs in to help MJF or whatever. But I think MJF really should be a long-term heel champion, as you said. He's certainly more than ready for everything that comes with being a champion, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there was a very small indication, I think, a couple of weeks ago of some kind of friction between him and Wardlow. I think it really would be a mistake to split those two up so soon. I think having Wardlow as his kind of backup as champion, I think would be really effective. Whether or not you go with Wardlow as a potential challenger for MJF, that could happen, but further down the line than this. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of people out there that could challenge him as and really could kind of help their standing as babyfaces if he was the champion. So.
Can he just win the title from Ambrose with interference from Wardlow, or do you think there needs to be like a third person sort of helping him out, like maybe like a debut from somebody or whatever?
Yeah, I don't think you need to do too much. I mean, it would fit his character to have some outside interference, help him win the championship, and I guess it would be overcomplicating things to add anyone else in. I think the obvious, sometimes the obvious outcome is the one to go with. So yeah, Wardlow interfering to help him win the belt, it makes sense, and I think it would be effective, and I think it would kind of re-cement them as a bit of a duo, because they haven't had that many kind of matches together, and in the grand scheme of things, they haven't been on screen together for that long either. So just to have Wardlow as the man responsible for costing Moxley a championship would be really useful, and I think that could maybe lead into a Moxley Wardlow feud, going forward as well.
Yeah, that's certainly fair. But I have a bad feeling that Moxley is holding on to the belt until they can reheat the artist Kenny Omega, and Omega can get his comeuppance. I mean, sorry, and give and until Omega can give Ambrose his comeuppance.
Um, yeah, I really hope not. Um, I'm just trying to imagine. I mean, Kenny Omega and a Moxley championship feud. There's not a whole lot of interest there for me, and I know that your opinions about Omega are a lot sort of lower than mine are. Although, I mean, even if you take into the fact that you're not the biggest Omega fan, do you accept at least that he is like a name in the wrestling industry? To have him as champion at least is some kind of like recognizability about that. Or are you just completely against the idea of him being champion at any point?
Dan, I really don't know, to be honest with you, because he certainly is a name in the wrestling industry, like you said. But I don't know if he has any mainstream appeal. I doubt that he does. Is there going to be a massive amount of wrestling fans who aren't already watching AEW and are going to tune in just because this guy is the champion? I really don't know. Would you say that he's a bigger commodity in the industry than John Moxley?
I mean, if you're talking about like wrestling being like ever getting to the point where it's mainstream again, I think neither Moxley nor Omega are the kind of guys to kind of get wrestling there again. You either want to have somebody who's got name recognition from the past, like a Jericho, or somebody who genuinely has the potential to kind of appeal to a wider audience, like MJF. So I think they're probably on a par with each other, but I think that's more of a reflection on the wrestling fan base at the moment. It's very insular, it's very kind of smart mark, kind of internet based, and it's going to take a lot of work to get it to the point where it's competing with things like the NFL and basketball again.
You don't think Kenny Omega versus a vacuum cleaner has the potential to draw 6 million views?
I think there are people out there that are willing to watch that match 6 million times, but I don't think it's going to attract 6 million people. Which is even more tragic when you think about it. I don't know. I think we're all just waiting for the return of the blow up doll. Was it him or was it maybe I'm being unfair. I think it was either him or the other Japanese guy that wrestled the blow up doll. I can't remember now.
I think it was him. I'm pretty sure it was him.
It may well have been. I know it's. Was it Kota Ibushi as well? I think he had a match against the blow up doll. And didn't was it Omega who had a match with a 9-year-old Japanese girl as well or something?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Oh dear.
No, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of Jim Cornette and definitely not a fan of his political views, but well, actually, I don't know what his political views are, but some of the politically incorrect things he says, I definitely do not endorse them. But I find his takes on Kenny Omega to be hilarious because I actually concur with most of what he says.
I think he calls him Kenny Olivier. I think is. Yeah. Yeah. God love Jim Cornette. So I think I don't know if we're ready to move on, but I think another thing that has kind of caught people's kind of attention this week with wrestling is a little bit of a Twitter interaction between The Rock and Daniel Bryan. So I think looking at it, it's very kind of tongue in cheek and not to be sort of taken too seriously, but it has kind of raised the very, very faint possibility of a match between the two of them in the future. Is that something you would like to see? The Rock and Daniel Bryan maybe face off at WrestleMania or SummerSlam?
Yeah, I think that'd be fantastic. I mean, the two of my favorite wrestlers of all time. If we're being realistic, the Rock never wrestles again. I mean, he said it as much in an interview on some morning show where he went on. He said that he quietly retired from pro wrestling. It's a pity that two of the biggest stars in the history of pro wrestling, The Rock and Steve Austin, never went out with retirement matches. Well, I mean, I suppose neither did Hulk Hogan, who's the third guy in that equation. But um, yeah, I mean, certainly, I think that'd be so much fun to watch. Uh, especially if you had Daniel Bryan as this sort of heel, and I absolutely think he could go toe to toe with The Rock on the mic. I think that'd be such great television.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a little bit of hope, I guess, for the current generation, because I think if you really tried to make a dream match out of anyone involving this generation, I think you'd be really hard pressed to do that. But Daniel Bryan against somebody like The Rock, or Daniel Bryan against Stone Cold, like that is, to me anyway, that is a dream match, at least on paper. I really can't think of any other situation where you would have.
And I think there's also I think there's an aspect of it as well, where if The Rock does have a dream match with just about anybody else other than Daniel Bryan, I would have a hard time rooting for the person wrestling The Rock. I would, there is almost nobody I would cheer for against The Rock on the current roster. Whereas if you, whereas when the shoe was on the other foot, when The Rock was wrestling Hulk Hogan, like a large part of the fan base did get behind him. I mean, obviously in Toronto the crowd got behind Hulk Hogan, but in the build-up to the match, a lot of people did want The Rock to beat Hogan.
Yeah. I think if there is any kind of return match with The Rock and somebody else, they definitely put it in Canada. Just to see if the same thing happened again. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that I think Bryan would be a very effective heel in that if they did a little bit of a program together as well. Like I remember, it was an episode of Raw a few years ago during the Rock and CM Punk feud, and I think Daniel Bryan kind of got involved in that when he was doing his. I think it was just after his on-screen wedding with AJ Lee that didn't go according to plan, and then he sort of definitely held his own in that situation with Punk and Rock, who were definitely two really big guys on the mic. Yeah, I put you on the spot and got you to think of a dream match involving The Rock and a current member from the AEW roster. Who would you go with?
Well, I'm trying to. I obviously can't say Chris Jericho because I don't think that'd be fair. Yeah. I certainly do think it'd be fun to see The Rock run down Kenny Omega on the mic. The Rock would probably spend like 3 hours watching Jim Cornette videos before he cuts a promo on Kenny Omega.
Yeah, or maybe a dream tag team match, The Rock and Stone Cold versus the Young Bucks, just to see the Young Bucks get utterly humiliated, and in all aspects would be comedy gold for me at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh dear. So as we kind of approach the end of the episode, is there anything else that has kind of caught your attention, or anything else you wanted to discuss about this week in wrestling?
Well, Dan, with the SummerSlam card, just one last thing. With the SummerSlam card slowly starting to take shape, the WWE obviously cannot play most of their drawing cards because Becky Lynch, Brock Lesnar, and Roman Reigns are all unavailable for one reason or the other. But what do you think of the matches that we have lined up for SummerSlam so far?
One thing I will say, I think I'm quite optimistic about the what I imagine would be the main event, Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton. I think if nothing else, I think Orton has given, or will be able to give, McIntyre a little bit of credibility back to his title reign after like a good few months of maybe kind of just treading water a little bit. So I'm looking forward to that, definitely. Interested to see what Dominic Mysterio can do on that sort of a stage. And then there's a few other matches that I'm not sort of too interested in that have been announced so far.
Fair enough. I agree with you there. I think the promo exchange between Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton was just fantastic.
Yeah.
But as we all know, that Randy Orton works a very slow, methodical style that doesn't always work, and but hopefully he'll prove me wrong at SummerSlam. I mean, his match with Edge wasn't the greatest wrestling match ever, but it was pretty darn good. And I hope these guys can pull their stuff together. The Seth Rollins thing is certainly intriguing to me. I mean, I don't think he's come along nearly as much as in terms of being a performer as you and I would have hoped in the last few years as a heel. But this storyline certainly has captured my attention. I'm curious to see what becomes of Dominic. what I
Yeah,
believe
absolutely.
we're almost 15 years removed from the um from that SummerSlam where Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio had a ladder match with the parental rights to Dominic or whatever on a ladder.
Yeah. Yeah, this proving that we shouldn't always look back on former eras of wrestling as with these kind of rose tinted glasses, because they definitely could do some bizarre things even back then. Not quite the level of the eye versus the eye match, but pretty
Absolutely.
bizarre in its own right. Like, just on Randy Orton though, I think just looking at some of the promo work that's been done so far, I think has been really quite effective. And I know. Sometimes I think Randy Orton does need to start being considered in that category of potential greatest of all time superstars. I know he's not from the most successful era when it comes to wrestling in terms of sort of mainstream popularity or anything, but there's just something about adding Orton into a feud that just gives it that legitimacy for me. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but
I think a great deal of that is also just because he's built some credibility after his work with Edge ever since WrestleMania. I think he has floundered at different points of his career, maybe due to a lack of motivation, some poor writing along the way, and a great deal of other issues. But yeah, I think he certainly, he's a Hall of Famer and a great of the sport. And I think that's beyond question for me. The fact that people, I mean, I hate to pick on him so much, but the fact that a large number of people would put Kenny Omega over Randy Orton is almost idiotic to me.
yeah, I think so. I'd agree with that. It's just it's the difference between somebody who had like a couple of good matches against a far superior opponent in Omega, and somebody like Orton who, whilst yes has had these kind of sort of lesser periods of his career, shall we say, has managed to kind of remain relatively consistent. I mean, for me, part of the appeal for Randy Orton for me is that kind of sort of laid back, kind of laissez-faire approach to wrestling. Almost like he obviously has an ego, but not to the extent that some of these kind of newer talent do, where they literally think they are the second coming of Jesus Christ and will sort of save wrestling from itself. Randy Orton just appears to be very much more kind of down to earth. I think that's something I really like about him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. I agree with you there.
I think one thing that could really work on the SummerSlam is the women's division. I haven't been watching too much of the main roster, but things I've seen from the women's wrestling has been pretty impressive. I don't know exactly where they're going, but there's something involving obviously Sasha Banks, Asuka, Bailey, and Shayna Baszler as well. So I think there's something that could be done there. Like, have they actually announced the match yet? Do you know?
No, they haven't announced anything for SummerSlam as of yet, but it certainly looks like we'll get some finality to the Sasha Banks Asuka chapter.
And I really hope that they do go with like an Asuka and Baszler feud. That's something that we weren't able to see on NXT because the two didn't kind of overlap. But that's something I would like to see as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. They're two excellent wrestlers, and I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Again, some interesting things to discuss this week. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up before we finish?
No, that's about it, Dan. It's been a pleasure recording with you as always, and I hope everybody, follows social distancing rules and stays safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Stay safe out there, everyone. And again, if you did like what you hear today, then feel free to give this video a like and share wherever you tend to kind of talk about wrestling with people, and do consider giving the channel a subscribe as well. But yeah, like you say in here, hope everybody is keeping safe out there, and all the best to you and your family as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll see you all next time, guys, and once again, thanks for listening. Take care.